Hello students, today we are going to start the lesson The Enemy. The Enemy, this is clearly understood that it is about the at least two persons who are enemy. But here, this goes for some longer. This lesson starts when the World War was going on, Second World War. And American and Japan, both the armies were the enemies, and they always made the enemy imprisoned. So this is the time that when the World War was going on, and an American prisoner, it means an American soldier, he was imprisoned by Japanese army. But one day he escaped from the prison and he reached to the oceans. But water waves, they put him once again on the beach. So he came washed ashore in a condition of dying, and he was found by a Japanese doctor. Now the thing is this one, that by being a doctor, the Japanese doctor should save the life of an enemy, or by being a patriot, the Japanese doctor should kill the person. But this dilemma was more for this doctor, because the doctor Sadao Hoki, he was in army also. He was an army doctor. That's why he was in confusion. So what did he do? This is in the lesson. We all know that the humanity is the topmost priority. This is the value which is going to be used for everybody. But the problem is here only that this is war time, and when there is war, we can consider that there is only one thing to do: to kill the enemies. This class. So now we are starting. See, Dr. Sadao Hoki's house was built on a spot of Japanese coast, where as a little boy he had often played. When Sadao was a boy, he had come here at the Japanese beach, and now he was living there. The low square stone house was set upon rocks, well above a narrow beach that was outlined with bent pines. Here he was living, and the house is based, or we can say the base of the house was on the rocks, and there were some trees of pines. When Sadao was a boy, he had climbed the pines. He had tried many times to climb the pines, supporting himself on his bare feet, as he had seen men do in the South Seas when they climbed for coconut. Whenever he went to the southern part of the oceans, southern part of that country where the oceans were there, he saw many times that the people were climbing on the trees to collect the coconut. So by following them, he climbed on the pine trees when he was very young. His father had taken him often to the islands of those seas, and never had he failed to say that to the little brave boy at his side. He always told, his father always told him one nice quotation, and that was those island yonders, that the boy see about those islands, they are the stepping stones to the future for Japan. The father informed the child, Dr. Sadao, that by stepping on these stones, by stepping on those islands, the Japan's future is going to be built. And by being a child, Sadao always asked, where shall we step from then? Means, what would be our goal, where we can go? But definitely future is not identified by anybody. Who knows? His father had answered. Father always answered that nobody knows who can limit our future? The future cannot be limited because it depends on what we make. It depends on the efforts we do. So Sadav's father always inspired him that we should do a lot of work to make our future. And future, it is really beyond. A man can achieve anything in the life. The same message was given. And one more thing, here we can come to know that Sadav's father was concerned for Japan, for his country. Next is Sadav had taken this into his mind as he did everything his father said. Sadav, he was a well and obedient child. So he took always the things which was said by father very seriously. His father, who had never joked or played with him, but who spent infinite pain upon him, who was his only son. Because Sadav's father had only one son, Sadav was alone there. He was the single child. That's why father wanted that Sadav should get the proper education, and he was taking a lot of pain to give him the best environment. And Sadav's father, he was very serious. He never played any joke to him. Sadav knew that his education was his father's chief concern. Sadav's father wanted that his son should get the proper education to learn. For this reason, he had been sent at 22 to America. When Sadav was of 22 and he had completed his basic education, then he was sent to America. For what? To learn all that could be learned of surgery and medicine, so that he could complete his education of medical science. Means Sadav's father sent him America to complete medical courses. He had come back at 30 after 8 years. When he was of 30, he completed his education of medical and he came back. And before his father died, now the father was not there, he had passed away. He had seen Sadav become famous not only as a surgeon but as a scientist. But before the death of father, father had seen his success, and the success was Sadav had become a good surgeon. Not only surgeon but also a scientist. Now the things are better. From here to this part, one important question comes. Because he was perfecting a discovery which would render wounds entirely clean. At that moment, Sadav was taking care of some discovery, just like Savlon or Dettol and hydrogen peroxide, which are used to clean the injury. So Sadav was on the perfection of discovery. He was inventing this medicine. That's why he had not been sent abroad with troops. When the army had gone to fight in foreign countries, he was not sent. So this was the reason. The question comes, why was Sadav not sent abroad with the troops? So first reason is this one, that because he was inventing or perfecting a discovery, or he was making some medicine which could clean the wound completely. That's why Sadav was not sent abroad with the troops. And second one is there. Also he knew there was some slight danger that the old general might need an operation for a condition for which he was now being treated medically. And for this possibility, Sadav was kept in Japan. So there are two things. Second one was that the general of the army was in need of operation any time. He was in danger. He had to be treated by Sadav. That's why Sadav was kept in Japan. So now we have discussed 2 points here. The first one, he was on the discovery of some medicine which could clean the wound entirely. And second one, the general can be in need of operation anytime. With these two reasons, Sadao was not sent to abroad to fight. Now, Sadao saw that clouds were rising from the ocean now. Because he was living at the coast, so clouds were coming out from the ocean. The unexpected warmth of the past few days, because for the last few days there was some heat. That's why at night it drawn heavy fog from the cold waves. That's why this was the time when the heavy fog was coming from ocean. Sadao watched mists hide outlines of a little islands near the shore and then come creeping up the beach below the house, writhing around the pines. Sadao was watching now the fog, the mist. That the mist has started to hide the outlines of that island, the edge of the islands, which was near the shore. And then after some times it would cover the house also, it would cover the pines also. Then he would go into the room where Hana is his wife. So where he would go to the wife, that Hana would be waiting for him, and he had also two children. With the two children means he would be into the family. But at this moment when he was thinking all such things, the door opened and she looked out a dark blue woolen houri and over her kimono, and then Hana came in the veranda where he was standing, and Hana was wearing typical Japanese dress of houri and kimono. She was wearing some Japanese skirt and a loose garment, that is the top. She came to him affectionately and put her arm through his as he stood, smiled and said nothing. Hana just showed her affection and she just put her one arm on the arm of Sadao and she smiled. That was the way of affection. He had met Hana in America. Now once again there is a good question. Once this has been asked in your board examination also. He had met Hana in America, but he had waited to fall in love with her until he was sure she was Japanese, because his father would never have received her unless she had been pure in her race. So this is the question. The question, where did Sadao meet Hana? So he met in America, but before proposing or before falling in love, he confirmed that if she was a Japanese or not, because he knew that his father was not going to accept Hana if she was not Japanese. She had been pure in her race. He wondered often whom he would have married if he had not met Hana. Sometimes he was surprised, or he was little bit in confusion, we can say, that if he could not meet Hana, he didn't know with whom he could marry. And by what luck he had found her in the most casual way. It was by chance, literally. At an American professor's house, he met Hana first time at an American professor's house. The professor and his wife had been kind people, anxious to do something for their few foreign students, because there were very few foreign students and foreigners always feel alone in other country. That's why professor and wife, they thought that the foreigner students must be cared more. Even the students, though bored, they felt bored, but still they had to accept their kindness, this kindness of professor and his wife. After all, he was a teacher. Sadao had often told Hana how nearly he had not gone to Professor Hardy's house that night. Sadao had informed Hana many times that on that day when the party was going on, He did not want to go to Professor Hardy's house on that night because the rooms were very small. The rooms were very small and food so bad. The food which they used to take was not as per Japanese culture. So he did not like the food as well as he did not like the environment of the house. The professor's wife, so voluble, she was very talkative. Always she spoke. When he had gone and there he had found Hana, but even then he visited Professor Harley's house and then he saw there a new student, that's the Hana, and had felt if he would love her, that if he would love her, if it were at all possible. It means if Hana is Japanese, then only he would show his love. Now he felt her hand on his arm and was aware of the pleasure it gave him. Now Sadao was feeling the hand of Hana over her hand and he was very happy. Even though they had been married years enough to have 2 children, now the time has gone, much time has gone of the marriage and they had 2 children. For they had not married heedlessly in America. They did not marry in America in hurry. They had finished their work at a school and had come home to Japan. They completed their education first in America, then came to Japan, and when his father had seen her marriage and marriage had been arranged in the old Japanese way, as they have, or we can say the father of Sadao accepted Hana, then the marriage was done in old Japanese way. It was the custom, and father was a true believer of Japanese culture. Although Sadao and Hana had talked everything over before and even they have talked earlier also, but now they were perfectly happy. She laid her cheek against his arm. Then Hana put her face on the arm of Sadao. This was the moment. It was at that moment, that both of them saw something black come out of the mist. They were standing on the veranda and they saw then something is coming out of the sea from the mist. It was a man, and then they realized that the shape was of a man. He was flung out of the ocean. He was coming out of the ocean with some fumbles. It seemed to his feet by a breaker, as his feet has touched some breaker, and he was fumbled. He staggered a few steps. He just crawled for a few steps. His body outlined against the mist. The outline is visible to Sadao and Hana, and they were confirmed now that he was a man. His arms above his head, and the arms they were above the head of him. Then the cold mist hit him again. Then once again mist overtook him. Who's that? Hana cried. Hana just wanted to know who was that. Even she was surprised herself. She dropped Sadao's arm and they both leaned over the railing of the veranda. Then they just tried to put their stretch on the railing of veranda so that they could see the things. Now they saw him again. The man was on his knees and hands, crawling. He was just crawling like a little baby of just 8-10 months. They always used to crawl or walk on hands and knees. So like the small baby, the man was also crawling. Then they saw him fall on his face and lie there. Then they realized that the man, he fell on the surface, he fell on the sand. So Sadao said, might be that a fisherman perhaps watched from his boat. He simply told that it could be a fisherman who had come out of his boat by chance. He ran quickly down the steps behind him. He started to move there. He wanted to see the man if he was in need of any medicine or any treatment, because the man was unable to walk properly. And Sadao was a doctor, so he went there, and behind him Hana came. Then Hana came. Hana was behind Sadao, behind her husband. Her white sleeves flying. Her sleeves, they were flying in with the blow of air. A mile or two away on either side there were fishing villages, but here was only the bare and lonely coast, dangerous with rocks. The surf beyond the beach was spiked with rocks. At the both sides, left hand side or right hand side, at the both sides, some around a mile or two away, there were some fishing villages. And they were thinking that from those fishing villages, this man belonged. But there was only, at this place, this is bare and lonely coast. And this coast is full of rocks. And the surf beyond the beach was spiked with rocks. And the waterways, they could come out by between the rocks, through the rocks. Somehow, the man had managed to come through them. Anyhow, the man had come out of the rocks. He must be badly torn, and they realized that the man was injured badly. They saw a man. They came towards him, that indeed it was so. Then they realized that the man could be, because they thought that he was injured, so they just ran towards that. And when they reached there, the sand on one side of him had already a stain of red soaking through. They realized that the blood was in the sand. Some part of the blood had come out and it was on the sand. So they were now sure that the man was wounded. He is wounded, said Sadao. Sadao exclaimed. He had made haste to the man who lay motionless, his face in the sand, an old cap stuck to his head soaked with seawater. He was in wet rags of garments. Sadao stopped. Hana at his side and turned the man's head. They saw the face. When Sadao realized that the man was wounded, he started to do something in hurry. The man was motionless. He was unconscious. And his face was downwards. His face was in the sand. And an old cap he was wearing, it had much water. And he had some pieces of garments. They were torn, tattered. So that's why they were rags. Sadao stopped and then he twisted the man. Then they saw the first time the face of this person, a white man. Hana whispered. Hana mumbled there. She spoke without much noise that this was a white man. White man means American. Sadao replied, yes, it was a white man. The wet cap fell away and there was his wet yellow hair. The cap was now away from the head. It fell off and the golden hair could be seen easily, long, as though for many weeks it had not been cut. And it was in the way that he had not been, the hair had not been cut for a long time. And upon his young and tortured face was a rough yellow beard, and the beard was also there because he was not also shaved. He was unconscious and knew nothing that they did for him. He did not know what the doctor and his wife was doing. Doctor and his wife were doing him. He didn't know because he was unconscious. Now Sadao remembered the wound. Sadao realized that he was injured also. With his expert finger, he began to search for it. He started to search the place, the injury, where it was. Blood flowed freshly at his touch. Blood started. When he touched the mark, the heel were opened and blood started to flow. On the right side of his lower back, Sadao saw that a gun wound had been reopened. Then he realized that the man was injured by a bullet. He was shot at the back side of lower back. The flesh was blackened with powder. At the mouth of the injury, the flesh was blackened with the gunpowder. Sometime, not many days ago, the man had been shot and had not been tended. It was bad chance that the rock had struck the wound. And he realized, because he was a doctor, so he realized that anyhow, not many days ago, he was shot and he has not been treated properly. And when he went into the rocks, the wound was much harm, or we can say the rock gave much harm to that wound. Is that clear? I hope it will be the benefits of you. We will continue the things in the next clip.